Years of identifying community needs and responding.
You could win a $25,000 limited edition Ford Thunderbird just by entering your Channel 11 Super Sweepstakes. You've received this entry packet in the mail. Now imagine yourself the winner of a fabulous trip or one of over 100 other super prizes. If your entry is received by May 31st, you become eligible for the early bird drawings, a luxury Caribbean cruise from American Express Travel Services, or a state-of-the-art 51-inch TV from Panasonic. And remember, the suggested contribution helps guarantee you the most valuable prize of all, Channel 11 programming. If you haven't received your entry packet, write to Super Sweepstakes in care of WTTW Channel 11. Win super prizes and support quality TV too. Enter today.
Today's programming is made possible in part by United Airlines. From the ground up, rededicated to giving you the service you deserve. Come fly the friendly skies.
You're watching us at Channel 11.
Caller ID is a piece of technology that enables you, the person receiving the call, to see the phone number of the person that is calling you.
There are many people who have substantial concerns about privacy and safety who object to this system. We agree with them.
Good evening, I'm John Callaway, and welcome to Chicago Tonight. Situation number one. The person who has been making obscene and threatening telephone calls to you over the months has nearly ruined your life. You feel a sickening surge of fear every time the telephone rings. If you only had a device which showed the telephone number of incoming calls, that surely would put a stop to the madness. Situation number two. You are an undercover detective. You are assigned to set up a drug buy, and your superior has ordered that you do it quickly, even though you're still at home. You can tell your commanding officer that you would be more than happy to get on it at once, but you can't, because there is a new device which permits anyone who uses it to have the telephone number of incoming calls displayed on a screen. Your cover would be blown. Law enforcement officers could be killed. Am I auditioning for a job as a science fiction writer this evening? No, I am simply reporting to you just a couple of the many real-life possibilities which could accompany a new telephone technological development, caller ID. You may have a chance to purchase caller ID in the near future, and so we thought it would be a good idea tonight to give you some of the pros and cons of that controversial proposed new service. Beginning with this report from Chicago Tonight's Chitra Raghavan.
Mr. Watson, I want to. It talks. Mr. Bell!
If Alexander Graham Bell could see his invention now, he'd be amazed by how it's been transformed by technology. A few years ago, digital technology allowed phone companies to tailor their services to customers. With call waiting, call forwarding, and answering machines, people began to control when and how they answered their phones.
Got a call.
I'll hold.
Thanks, Mom. Hello?
Hey, you're on phone fax for $10,000.
The newest technology is a fast multi-channel phone switching system called SS7, or Signaling System 7. It is already in place on Chicago's South Side. With SS7, phones can perform complex functions such as caller ID.
I'm going to call you, and you will be able to see on your box my phone number.
Okay. Hello?
Hi. As you can tell on the screen, it shows my phone number that I'm calling, but it also indicates the date that I called and the time. And it indicates that you've got 26 other calls that have been stored on this machine prior to mine. In New Jersey, they have found that caller ID has reduced the amount of reported harassing and annoying phone calls by 50%, just by caller ID being in the marketplace. Most often, women are the victims of the harassing phone calls. Caller ID deters people from making those phone calls in the first place because one of the things that they value is their anonymity.
Who is this? Who is this, please?
Why don't you guess?
555-1482.
During the past 2 years, New Jersey's Bell Atlantic has provided caller ID to more than 50,000 customers. Besides lowering the number of crank calls, a Bell spokesman says there has been a sharp decline in the number of bomb threats, false fire alarms, and fraud as a result of caller ID. But the American Civil Liberties Union has challenged caller ID in many states, including Illinois.
There are many people who have substantial concerns about privacy and safety who object to this system. We agree with them.
If the Illinois Commerce Commission approves caller ID, Centel, GTE, and Illinois Bell plan to offer the service to some of their customers later this year. But the ACLU wants these companies also to provide call blocking. This feature would allow callers to block their numbers from being displayed to the people they call.
It puts the decision in the hands of the person making the call. At the same time, the person receiving the call always has the option of not answering a call if the number has been blocked. If no number appears on their screen, they simply don't need to answer the call. So we think that caller ID with call blocking strikes a pretty fair balance between the privacy interests of the people making the call as well as the people receiving the call.
Illinois Bell will also introduce services such as automatic callback, call screening, and distinctive ringing citywide. With the addition of these new services, reaching out to touch someone is becoming more and more complicated. The new SS7 system would also provide automatic callback. Your phone would call back the last person who tried to reach you. You could also program a recorded message for people you don't want to talk to by feeding their numbers into your phone. Or you could assign a distinctive ringing tone to some phone numbers. These services are now available on Chicago's South Side, where SS7 technology is in place. But none of these new features is likely to cause as much debate as caller ID. For Chicago Tonight, I'm Chitra Raghavan.
And now joining us are Laura Littel, Staff Manager of Media Relations for Illinois Bell, Jane Whitcher, Staff Counsel for the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois, and James Carlini, President of Carlini & Associates, which is a Hinsdale-based management firm specializing in telecommunications. Ms. Littel, there is legislation pending in the General Assembly of Illinois which would require the telephone companies, if they were going to offer this caller ID service, to also offer free of charge a blocking service. What's Illinois Bell's position on that?
When Illinois Bell does file its tariff to offer caller ID in the state of Illinois, we will be filing the tariff with the Illinois Commerce Commission asking for caller ID unrestricted without blocking to the general public.
And why?
Our position is that if you put blocking on caller ID, it devalues the service. We realize that there are some people that do have some special concerns. You mentioned them in the open before the video piece. And we feel that there are, just as there's technology that enables us to have caller ID, there are many things that we have already available that we can work with the drug enforcement agents, the crisis intervention, and we can help them and we can come to some solutions without negating and devaluing the entire service by having a call blocking available.
Are you saying that if it's determined that law enforcement people, drug enforcement people, certain other professionals really need a blocking device, that you might go before the ICC and say, yes, there will be some except we don't want the general public to have blocking, but we can work out a deal with those that you and we determine really need it?
We are already talking with drug enforcement agencies. We are talking with crisis intervention agencies, talking to them about solutions other than blocking
So
solutions.
you acknowledge it's a problem?
With those certain agencies, they have some special needs, and we are sensitive to those needs. We know that they have different circumstances that you and I might not encounter in our daily lives. And we are working with them to come up with some solutions, and we've got dialogue going on with them right now.
Well, Ms. Whitcher, if the telephone companies are able to work out enough exceptions to this, then would you, I know the ACLU is on record as supporting the legislation which wants everybody to have this call blocking device provided to them free. Could you see yourself backing down off of that?
I don't think so, John. We're concerned that we think that the decision about who has call blocking shouldn't be left in Bell's hands. We think that each individual ought to be able to determine for himself or herself whether they want to block a particular call or block their number from showing up no matter when they make a call. We don't think that individuals or groups ought to have to throw themselves on Bell's mercy in order to be able to protect their private unlisted phone numbers. For example, what's to say that Bell would allow one group to block their calls, but not allow another group to block their calls? We don't think Bell ought to be making those decisions. We think individuals should.
If it were shown to you, if there were research that would show you that the result of ordering that the telephone companies indeed have to provide a free blocking service to anyone who wants it, indeed destroyed the marketability of caller ID, what would you say to that?
Well, I think first it's important to look at what the marketability of caller ID is. In our view, the real people who want caller ID and the real use for it, and I think Jim will agree, is for businesses, especially businesses who do telemarketing, to enable them to compile consumer profiles. For example, if you make a telephone call in response to an ad in the newspaper for a car, once you make the call with caller ID, the car dealer that you call has your phone number. To that phone number, he can add information such as the type of car you're interested in, the price, whether you qualify for credit. He, of course, can get your name and address because he's got your telephone number.
Then he markets all of that?
He can use that information to call you back. He can market that to another car dealer who then will call you. So we think that caller ID without call blocking will result in more unwanted phone calls, not fewer. And that's really the market
But do you
for caller
acknowledge
ID.
that the New Jersey experience shows that there are all kinds of people who were getting harassing calls, obscene calls, bothersome calls in the middle of the night, and now that traffic is profoundly cut?
Well, we think that, yes, New Jersey has had a substantial decrease in the reported numbers of harassing phone calls, but it's important to look at the entire system that's in effect in New Jersey. New Jersey also has, for example, distinctive ring, selective call forwarding, some of the other features that Chitrer went through. They also have an additional feature that Bell could offer here but won't, called Call Trace. What Call Trace does, and it's contained in the same software that enables caller ID and the rest of these services to work, Call Trace allows you to plug in 3 digits. That sends a message to the phone company to capture the information about that call. The phone company then turns it over to the police, and you cooperate with the police and work to prosecute the person who's called you. Now, Bell won't offer that here.
Well,
if
we'll get
Bell
back
would
to that.
offer that here, I think
Mr.
that would solve
Carlini,
a
do
lot
you
of the
agree
problems.
with the notion that it's really a telemarketing motivated innovation?
I think that it's a good feature in the right hands and in the right businesses, but I think from a total standpoint, you are going to get some of the things that Ms. Whitcher just pointed out. I think that there are other ways to get around harassing calls, and one is it's called customer originated trace, and that is another feature within the SS7 capability, where you activate, when you get a bad phone call, you activate something on your phone, maybe the pound sign or the star button, and what happens is you get that trace activated at the central office.
It doesn't mean that you necessarily know the number of the person who called, but it means that then the authorities can go to work on this. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And Ms. Littel, I was wondering, I didn't know whether it was my fictional imagination going to work or not, but I worried about the fact that if somebody did know the number of the person who was harassing, particularly in the first instances when this technology was introduced, that they might just get a gun and go out and go after them, and that it might be best that if you only had call tracing and let the authorities handle that.
The problem with letting the authorities handle that is they don't handle it. They can't handle it. It is not a priority. Jane did mention Call Trace. Call Trace is available in New Jersey. But what they're finding out is that it is not having the deterrent effect that caller ID is. In Pennsylvania...
I'm sorry, when you have caller ID available, then it's almost impossible to know, isn't it, then, whether call trace... Doesn't call trace have to be introduced in the absence of caller ID if you want to know whether it's effective or not?
And I was going to mention in Pennsylvania, there is that situation. Pennsylvania has Call Trace but does not have caller ID yet. New Jersey has Call Trace and caller ID. The amount of annoying reports of help for harassing phone calls has increased in Pennsylvania. You've got a lot of people activating Call Trace. In New Jersey, where you have caller ID, the obvious change in this test, the amount of reports of harassing and annoying phone calls, help to their annoyance call bureau, has decreased 49%. With the Call Trace system, it's just a mechanized trap and trace. Nothing else has changed. You still have, now you have in an instant our central office capturing that phone number. We still need to work with the customer and the police department to get everyone working together through the court problems.
Mr. Carlini.
I was going to say, customer-originated trace, the new trace system is a software-based feature. It's not a mechanical-based feature.
It's automatic.
No, wait a minute. You're using some jargon that a lot of us don't understand. What do you mean?
The other feature that they talked about, caller trace, not
Yes.
caller ID, but customer-originated trace, is a software-based option within the central office, not as a mechanical-based system as you just mentioned.
It's automatic, as opposed to you calling us and setting up a daily log. It's just you do punch in a code. It's automatic, and we capture it.
Let me ask you a question. For the persons who pay $1.45 a month not to have their numbers listed, Ms. Littel, what do you think they want for their $1.45 a month? What do you think it is they're buying?
The people that purchase the unpub or the non-listed phone numbers, what they are purchasing from us and what we are agreeing to is that we will not list their phone number in the directory and we will not give out their phone number through 411.
And when you agree not to give it out through 411, what is it you think they're purchasing? Why is that such a popular service?
I think because they don't want people to be able to have their name and call us and say, I want this person's phone number.
They want confidentiality, don't they?
In some instances, they want to prevent other people from getting their phone numbers that would possibly put them on a list.
That's right, or for a variety of reasons, right? They want confidentiality and they don't, I'm saying, could you answer the question, yes, that there are a variety of reasons why they want that service?
There is a variety of reasons, and one of the reasons is they want to have control over who gets their phone number.
And you've offered that service in the past, and you offer it today.
Yes.
Now.
And we will continue to offer
And you'll
that.
continue to offer it. Is it true that with caller ID, that the person who has an unlisted number, the number appears if the person having caller ID receives the call?
Yes, it will be displayed.
So therefore, that service which you've just paid $1.45 a month for is obliterated.
They still have control over who is going to get their phone number. When they place the phone call, if the other person on the other end does have caller ID, they will know that. They know that that other person could get their phone number if they have caller ID. So that still is in their control over who gets their phone number.
It is not in their control if they feel the necessity to have confidentiality and at the same time the necessity to make the telephone call that they used to be able to make in a system which didn't have caller ID.
In New Jersey, more than half of the people that have bought caller ID are customers who are unlisted or non-pub.
But could you agree that the service of confidentiality is destroyed if caller ID is introduced in any practical sense?
If there are instances where they feel for some reason they want to remain anonymous when they place a phone call, there are alternatives so that their home number is not displayed.
And those alternatives are?
The alternatives, they could make the call from their business because then the business number is displayed, not their home number. They can use a payphone. They can use the operator. They can use their calling card to place those calls. Those are for the few instances that they wish to remain anonymous. You have to keep in mind the big picture. How many calls do you place that you really want to remain anonymous? And then why do you want to remain anonymous?
How do you respond to that, Ms. Whitcher?
Well, John, I think you're exactly on target because you're thinking of yourself as a person making calls, not just getting them. And what Bell has done with caller ID is after all of these years of selling us a service that over a third of the people in Chicago subscribe to, of having an unlisted number, promising not to give that number out, respecting our privacy by keeping that number confidential, they're marketing a service to sell those numbers. That's what caller ID does. I think that the solutions that Laura identified about going to a payphone, placing a call through an operator, sometimes Bell suggests that you can get an outward-only line, one that doesn't ring. Of course, that has a number assigned to it too, and that has a, so that your location can be traced. That number would appear on a caller ID screen. These are not practical solutions.
Well, let me offer so Mr. Carlini, you're a telecommunications expert. Let me ask you if a practical middle ground solution for the person who's receiving harassing calls and who wants to get away from that. One of the techniques in everyday life that I see people use is that they buy low-cost answering machines and they screen their telephone calls. Now, this, Ms. Littel, how much would this cost, this new service? $7.50 a month or something like that?
In New Jersey, where it's offered, it's $6.50 a month. Ohio, where the other Ameritech company has filed a tariff, it's $6.50 a month. Illinois,
and then how much is the initial equipment?
It can range anywhere from $50 to $80 depending upon what you want the equipment to do.
So if you bought, if I came to you, Mr. Carlini, and I said, I'm really having some problems and I don't want to spend $6.50 a month on caller ID and I don't want an initial cost of $80,
Right.
but I just want to go out and buy myself a $50 machine to answer and screen calls like a lot of people do already, would you say to me that that's a way to deal with this?
Sure, that's one way. It's one easy way to deal with it. But I think the real marketing strategy behind the caller ID feature by the operating companies is that they're selling this service to businesses. Businesses are going to take these numbers as they get transferred over the phone line and use that to access databases that they have. I'll give you a good example. If I'm calling a catalog retail store like Sears or Spiegel's, I can call in and they get my numbers through this caller ID capability. They can then access a database on their computer systems and bring up my record, bring up my information of what I've bought in the past, and they get all this information by getting this caller ID passed through. That's the way it's actually being sold to businesses.
Already.
But my question to you, Mr. Carlini, is are you against caller ID, or are you just suggesting that maybe the company needs to introduce it in a different way?
I think the company has to introduce it in a different way. I think they have to be a little bit more flexible rather than taking a sort of a dictatorial approach where they're looking at giving this feature out to the public and saying, here, take it or leave it.
How can they be more flexible? Give me an example of how they might be more flexible.
They can provide a call blocking, as Ms. Whitcher talked about. They can provide a call blocking capability on the phone just by hitting a star or some other touch tone pad on the phone. You can get that feature blocked or get those digits blocked for a typical call that you might call if you're calling some type of hotline that you don't want to be identified. If someone's calling an AIDS hotline or a cocaine hotline, they may not want to be identified. And there's no telling on who has what type of capability on the other side.
I thought I read in some of the research that one effective way, short of caller ID, that you could sometimes intimidate the intimidator is to have automatic callback. Somebody calls you and then they hang up and you call them right back and say, hi, I got your number. You don't have their number, but you tell them you have your number.
Right. The research, and the whole thing is that marketing research sometimes isn't as accurate as what happens when you actually put these capabilities out into the public access. In other words, once the feature is out in public, people might use them or abuse them differently than what a lot of the research states in the beginning.
But we've got New Jersey.
Well,
He's
let's
talking
talk
about
about
Pennsylvania.
All right, let's talk about New
Let's
Jersey.
talk about a real live situation. It has been operating in New Jersey for more than 2 years.
And the harassing calls are simply way down, right?
49% decrease in harassing and annoying phone calls. Almost eliminated false fire alarms and bomb threats. Some of the schools that have caller ID say that school attendance has gone up because they're able to verify the phone number the kids are calling from. Some of the small businesses, service operation types of companies, pizza places, florists, they have dramatically cut down on fraud.
Ms. Whitcher, shouldn't the American Civil Liberties Union applaud that and simply work with the telephone company on that first set of issues that we talked about, the law enforcement people, certain other professionals, and then we'll have the best of both worlds?
Well, that's a great idea, but in fact, it wouldn't give us the best of both worlds. In New Jersey, I think it's important to understand, New Jersey has not just caller ID, it has automatic callback, call trace, and all of the other services that are in this software. That is everything that Bell wants to offer here except call block and call trace. Call trace, we think, is the really effective service, and Bell ought to be offering that here. But more importantly, we've discovered that what really happens in New Jersey is that people who complain loud enough and who badger the New Jersey telephone company enough are called in and they're given a secret blocking code. So in fact, in New Jersey, there is call blocking. It's just that you have to throw yourself on the mercy of the phone company and convince them.
Little politics
that's
there?
Right, exactly. And convince them that whatever problem you've identified for yourself is sufficient that they should offer you call blocking. We don't think that people ought to have to do that.
Ms. Littel, is that going on in New Jersey?
As far as I know, no. And when Jane mentioned earlier about Illinois Bell having control in selective cases, the alternatives, Illinois Bell would not have that control. That would be in the control of the Illinois Commerce Commission, determining the selective groups that would have some of our alternatives that we would work with. It is not something that the phone company should be in the business of deciding who has a special need and who doesn't have a special need.
So if it is going on in New Jersey, you don't want it to go on in Illinois?
I don't think that's the proper place for it.
Well, let's compare. I think we should compare Illinois Bell's attitude to Centel. Centel also provides local service in much of Illinois. Centel has made public statements that when they offer caller ID, and they're planning on offering it at about the same time Bell seeks permission to, they're going to offer call trace, and they're also going to offer call blocking. I think that Bell should use Centel as a model. If Centel can do it, if Centel can market caller ID with these other features available, surely
Mr.
Bell
Carlini,
can.
what's your professional judgment on what happens if call blocking is offered on a wholesale basis, particularly if it's offered free? Does that put the caller ID aspect out of business?
No, not at all, because if I call up a company where I want my digits being sent across the phone lines, I'm going to let it go. But if I call up someone or some other agency where I don't want my digits being sent across, then I have that capability to lock out that call or lock out that signal.
There seems to be a misunderstanding that we are marketing this towards business customers. Caller ID is being marketed and sold towards the residence customer.
Excuse me, I disagree with that. I disagree. I sit with businesses all the time.
900 services. That's an ANI. That's an automatic number identification, which is offered through the long distance companies.
No,
that's been going on since 1982. When you call an 800 number or a 900 number, your number is displayed for billing purposes. Many of these companies have taken the next step. Caller ID is for the residence
Carlini,
customer.
are you saying that doesn't exist already?
It exists in certain cases. When you call 911, you get your digits transferred, but it's on a limited basis. In other words, if you call from a payphone to 911 or a cellular phone from 911, nothing appears on their screen. This enhanced capability in SS7, this customer caller ID, would give anybody the ability to see those digits. And it is being marketed, I'm sorry to disagree with you, but it is being marketed to businesses as a way to get...
number identification is being
marketed
through...
As well as caller ID, it's the same capability. I work with companies.
And I agree with you. ANI, automatic number identification,
so it's the same
since 1982.
I was interested, Ms. Whitcher, in the American Civil Liberties Union press release about this. You have a whole laundry list, not just law enforcement people who would be endangered. You talk about lawyers or psychiatrists or persons who are involved in domestic violence. Could you explain what your concerns are there?
Yes, I'd be happy to. There are many people who want to make calls from home without displaying either their location or their own private number. For example, a psychiatrist who wants to return a call that's been made to his answering service to a troubled patient may or may not want to give out his own private home phone number to that patient. There are many, many people in the domestic violence community who are concerned that caller ID could be used by people who abuse their spouses to track those spouses down. If an abused woman has taken shelter in a domestic violence shelter, wants to call home maybe to check on her family, she'll be unable to do that without giving out the location of the shelter.
And in the journalism field, I have sources call me every day who say, Mr. Callaway, with all due respect, I don't want to identify myself, but I want to tell you about something that's going on. And I assume governmental agencies do, etc. Do they all have to go out to a payphone?
Well, you don't have to buy caller ID.
You can imagine,
no, but they may assume that I have it.
And how can you guarantee that someone might not
with all the
tap the line?
hotlines and the businesses, it is in their best interest, not if they're not going to use caller ID, to let people know. AIDS hotlines, the suicide hotlines.
How do I know that? Why should they trust me?
Let's take this example.
They're businesses to tap the line. Someone else is going to tap the line. Buy a $50 device.
Let me say goodbye to our guests, Laura Littel, thank you very much, James Carlini and Jane Whitcher, thank you all very much for being with us, and thank you for being with us. I'm John Callaway. Good night.
I've got a great example.
Wiretapping is a whole nother
Let's say
issue.
you want to call the Internal Revenue Service and
hang
ask
on.
them a question about your tax liability. With caller ID, you can't call the IRS without them knowing who you are. They'll know what your concern is. You can't make an anonymous call to a government agency.
Any governmental
with caller
agency,
ID at all.
and there's already, the census tells us that we already have enough suspicion out there of governmental agencies.
So you're making the assumption that people are going to abuse this, and everyone out there is an unscrupulous business person or is out to get you.
Well,
Caller ID
potential
puts the
for
control
abuse that
back
we're
in my hands.
Can I tell you that it's just when people call me, I don't think they think I'm unscrupulous. It's that they're saying, I'm scared. I've got to call you. You know, they're saying, I trust you, Callaway, but I don't want to tell you my home phone. I mean,
they don't want a record of that.
But they don't know that I haven't purchased it. That's what I'm telling you.
If you take a look at 976.
Tribute and a celebration tomorrow at 8. Hello, I'm Marty Robinson. As a spokesman for WTTW and as the host of an opera program on WFMT, I would like to tell you about something very special. This June, Channel 11 will present Richard